Happy to have on the Illini Inquirer podcast, Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. And Allen, it's a new era in Illinois football. We saw, I think, more consistent football week to week with Illinois this year. They go 5-7, not a fantastic year, but competitive throughout the Big Ten West. And they've had a full year to dive into recruiting. So I'm just wondering your initial impressions of Bret Bielema's staff, their first full recruiting class.
Yeah, so the first impression is I get to talk to you a lot more and help you guys out a lot more because there's a lot more focus in the region, and especially in state and around the other states in the Midwest. So that's nice. I mean, they're a Big Ten program. You would expect them to be more active there. And so I think they've done a great job of that, because you would think it would be hard to come in your first year. There were relationships to repair. I think there was some branding that needed to be repaired as far as, do they even care about recruiting the kids from here? You would think that might take some time to show some results. It didn't really. When you look at the kids that they got in this class from in-state, they weren't just guys like, we're going to pluck this guy who's low-hanging fruit. You know, they had to win some battles for those kids. And so I thought they did a really good job. And, you know, we both know that they put an emphasis on it right away. They called a lot of high school coaches. They did a lot of kind of relations things that I think helped and is going to help moving forward as well.
Why do you think that matters, Allen, recruiting state? I mean, I've talked about it for a decade here with Illinois, covering them. Why do you think it matters for Illinois to put such a huge effort into recruiting its own state?
Yeah, so first of all, you know, those guys are probably less likely to leave. You're talking about kids who can go home and have parental support, can be there every week. You're talking about, I think there's some feeling with the team of like, this is, you know, we're taking care of our home state. Maybe that helps you in terms of fan support, people coming to the games, people coming to see kids that they know, that they went to high school with, that they taught, all those sorts of things. And then I think beyond that, it's just harder to leave your state and your region and win battles. Like if Jared Badie was in Texas, probably have a harder time getting him, or Georgia, if he's down there. You know, you're battling all sorts of different schools, and you're battling distance and all those things. So I think you give yourself an easier chance to keep Power 5 talent and get that into your class if you're not kind of have location working against you.
Allen, not a top 500 prospect in this class, but as you kind of look at the top of this, or you kind of look at the 19 commitments in this class, what encourages you if you're an Illinois fan?
Well, I think it's that you've come in and you've already won some battles. Guys who previously wouldn't have gone to Illinois. And then I think you also feel good about this staff's ability to evaluate with how many of those guys came through and had good seasons. You know, Jordan Anderson, on the lower on the 3-star scale, when they take his commitment, one of the more dominant players in the state of Illinois this year moves up in the rankings as a result. So I think you feel good about their ability to take a guy like him and evaluate him. Jordan wasn't an easy eval because of his position and his body type and what could he be, what could he not be. So I think you feel good about that. I think you feel good that they're moving in the right direction there. They haven't just abandoned going out of state. It's not like we're taking only Midwest guys. So I think there's the right blend here regionally of let's go out of state and pull some guys who we know can play here, who can help us, but also, you know, keep the Midwest talent at home.
I want to ask you specifically about some of these guys. Jordan Anderson, you mentioned there, 6'3", 225 pounds. Not many running backs these days, Allen, who go that big. And, you know, when you watch him, I watch him in person a couple of times this year. He's just a man amongst boys. So when you are evaluating him, how do you kind of foresee his role at the next level, and why do you think he can succeed at that level? You know, when obviously defenses are going to be bigger, easier to tackle him when you got great athletes who are his size. So what is your evaluation of him going to the next level?
Yeah, I think we were really kind of wondering what he was going to be or how to evaluate him at first. And then I think sometimes you can trick yourself. Like at the end of the day, this guy is big, he's productive, he's athletic. And I think we saw that in a camp setting. That helped a lot, where you took the pads off him, you kind of stripped away the physicality of it. As you mentioned, like he's running through competition that isn't as big and strong. And we saw him in camp. He caught the football very well. He ran routes well. You saw that he could do some things away from his body. He wasn't just this bulldozer. And then I think there's still a place for that kind of back. When you look around the league, you look around some of the other guys that have had success. I look at a guy like Xander Horvath at Purdue, who I doubt anybody thought would be a successful I know nobody did because no one offered him a scholarship out of high school. And you wouldn't have thought that he would be somebody that you could hand the football to and have success in the Big Ten. I look at a guy like that and say, Jordan Anderson can be that. And then if he's not, he can do enough other things, block, catch, even tackle, to where like there's a spot for that guy on the roster somewhere.
Yeah, he's just a good football player, right? At some point, those guys find a way to the field. One of the biggest gets in this class is Aidan Laughery, and there's not often that Ford County, Illinois, produces a Power 5 prospect. So to get the kid from GCMS was a monster win over Iowa, and Iowa with the season they had, it looks even better in hindsight. He's had some injury issues in high school, but what do you like so much about Aidan Laughery? Because I believe 24/7 Sports, I think we're the highest on him at number 14 in the state.
Yeah, so first, that's, when you talk about encouraging signs in the class, Iowa's not an easy school to beat in recruiting. I don't know how many times Illinois has done it in the last 4 or 5 years before Bielma was in. I don't think it's been many. And so they do it here. And that seemed to be heading Iowa's direction. And not just them, but, Michigan State had offered him. There were other schools that were involved with him. So what we like about him, first of all, you can't talk about him and not talk about the speed. I mean, and it is verified speed on the track. And then from there, it's like, is he just a track guy, or does the speed translate to the football field? It does. Is he still a physical football player? His coaches say, they love him on both sides of the ball. Could have been recruited on either side of the football as a defensive back or as a running back slot. And I think over the years, when we've kind of missed guys, or maybe guys were too low, or I feel like we could have had somebody higher, especially in the state. I look at a guy like Scotty Miller, who's at Bolingbrook. Watched him catch touchdown passes in the playoffs last year, and I went back and I'm looking at the track times and going, how did we let this slide past us with this kind of speed? Usually we've missed like 100-meter time or something in there that could have told us this guy was going to be pretty good. So with Aiden, it's like, let's trust the data. If a guy can run that fast and he's a good football player on film, chances are he's going to find his way into being a pretty good football player in college.
2 other kids in state that were significant wins for them. Eian Pugh was committed to Cincinnati, had the Iowa offer. They get him, and Iowa gets Jacob Bostic, who's a similar prospect. But Jared Badie as well had a bunch of Big Ten offers, Power 5 offers. I don't think we expect those guys to maybe make an immediate impact, but long term, what do you think they can be for Illinois?
Yeah, Ian, the state of Illinois had such a strange season last year that by the time we played in the spring, it just didn't even feel right, going to some of those games and looking at the tape, it was different. And so I think Ian, in the spring, we were kind of not sure about what to think of him and really the team at Fenwick. When they come back this year and they win a state title, he plays really, really well, very naturally gifted. And I think that's the story with him and Jared Badie. You have 2 guys who are very long at their position, very athletic, have lots of upside. I think both guys need the weight room. Both guys need the strength and conditioning program. They need some development, but both guys, that's the kind of guy that, like I said, when you're a new staff and you're trying to build a program, you're not going to get a lot of ready-made guys. You have to develop guys like this in order to win. And both of those guys are athletic and big and long and have a lot of upside. So now it's on Illinois to develop.
Let's keep it in state, Allen. I thought when Bret Bielema came in here, there were a couple of guys I thought, Illinois needs to look at. Jordan Anderson was near the top of the list, but I also thought Hank Beatty is a guy that Illinois just needs to get in its program. Like, if you're a Michigan, maybe you don't offer a Hank Beatty, but I just thought Illinois needs to add that kind of downstate talent if they're able to. What do you think he can be at the next level? Obviously a great athlete at his size of high school. Rochester's a powerhouse here. What do you think he can bring to the Illinois program?
Yeah, I think, when we've talked about evaluating wide receivers, it's easy to fall in love with the 6'3", gazelles that are out there. But the NFL is full of slot receivers who we had ranked too low. And I think a guy like him, I just mentioned Scotty Miller, or a guy like Willie Snead that was in the Midwest. Those are guys that we undervalue because they weren't quite as tall as the other guys, not quite the pretty looking prospect, but they're really skilled and they're really athletic. And I think that's exactly what Hank Beatty is. Extremely skilled as a route runner. You even saw that in a sophomore tape. And then, when they've needed him to do other things, needed him to end up playing quarterback, he's done that and done it extremely well. I think he has the chance to be the guy in this class that we most look at in several years and say, like, maybe we should have had him a little bit higher. He's been kind of hidden from view. No camps, hasn't been out there on doesn't even have a tape put together from this year. And so that, as somebody who assigns the rankings, he scares me a lot because we don't have as much information on him. But I think what we've seen, that kid can be really, really good.
The one guy I went back senior year. So I want to ask you about it because Henry Boyer, when they took him, I know you and I talked, man, he could be an interesting left tackle prospect, but I watched his film this year and I do see a guy that can play a little bit of tight end as a jumbo blocker, as a guy in the red zone. Like he's a guy that in my head, like I didn't know what he was when they first got him, maybe a project, but to me, he's kind of rising in my mind of after seeing some of his senior film. So what did you think of him?
Yeah, the same thing as you. He was just a big frame before he got to Brother Rice. It's like, we need to keep an eye on this guy because of how big he is. He hasn't really shown us much yet in terms of development and what he could be. I think you've seen that progression happen the last 2 years, and you like that. Honestly, from sophomore to junior year tape, huge difference, and from junior year to senior year tape, huge difference. So you expect that again once he gets to college, and I do think he can be a big tight end. And I do think that, like we said with Jordan Anderson, and there being a place still for a kind of a traditional big back, I think there's a place still for traditional tight ends. I think what they're going to have to figure out at Illinois, and what Henry's going to have to figure out is that better than what the upside would be at another position? Where can he most help them? I think long term, there's a lot of NFL offensive tackles that look like Henry Boyer as a senior. Some of them played for Bret Bielema at Wisconsin. So, they have experience with making this kind of transition. Wouldn't shock me if he's wearing 77 in a couple of years and is an all Big Ten guy at offensive tackle. But he showed enough this year to where we said, this guy, we should keep him at tight end for the moment because I think he can, at least in the rankings, because he looked good enough there.
It's weird to talk about this many in-state guys, Alan, but I gotta throw a couple more at you because Illinois got 9 of them at the moment. They took some chances on guys, got out in front, right? Malachi Hood, linebacker at Joliet Catholic, Clayton Leonard, small school at Iroquois West, just south of Kankakee here. And then TJ Griffin, kid who played for an 0-9 team, but I got a friend who coaches at one of the Lincoln Way schools, and he said, that guy's a dude. So what do you think? Those guys are kind of sleeper prospects. Illinois got in front. What do you think of adding guys like that?
Yeah, I think you have to blend winning the battles for the Jared Badies and the Aidan Laugherys with, you're going to have to hit on some of these evaluations. And I think that this staff has done that in the past before they got to Illinois, and they're going to trust that. I think, and even at Illinois before they got there, we've covered some guys like that over the year where it's like Nate Hobbs himself was kind of a late riser, wasn't like this guy they recruited heavily through the process. We've seen the Doug Kramers and the Alex Palczewskis and those guys work. I think these guys are in that mold. TJ Griffin, for being a guy that nobody knew, when I turned on the tape, I was like, this is a really good find. And so as an Illinois fan, I think you have to feel good about your staff continuing to turn over rocks and finding a kid like that in his senior year. I thought his film really stood out. We'll see what happens with him once he gets to college. I think that's a really good take. Clayton Leonard, a developmental guy. That's a project for Bielema and Bart Miller. He's got a lot of talent, got a frame. Going to have to come in and get in the weight room. But I think, again, you take a kid in state who has some frame and some athleticism and plays hard on tape. So I think those are the kind of guys that you're going to have to hit on a couple of them in order for the program to grow.
Big offensive line class. Not a surprise with Bret Bielema, right? And Bart Miller, I think you've known has been a pretty good recruiter in the Midwest, even when he was out in say, Wyoming. Want to ask you about a few of those guys. And I got to start with this huge international man of mystery, Magnus Møller, 6'9", 300 pounds, met him, just an unbelievable kid to talk to, Alan. But I said, hey, I don't know what you guys want to rank him, but he's committed. So can we get him ranked? And you came back with a pretty high number. Why? Why did you feel Magnus Møller should be a high 3-star recruit?
So, I tried to go into that with about as clean of a slate as could be. And I really did, because I didn't know a ton about that guy. I know Brandon Collier and the PPI guys, and they have mentioned him but try to go in without any bias and just look at this, because it would be really easy to just see an international kid who's maybe a little bit physically underdeveloped, who's going to Illinois, wasn't, heavily, he had some offers, but it wasn't like the entire country was going after him. It'd be really easy to just slap below 80 on a kid like that. Let's really watch this. And I thought he was outstanding. I mean, I really expected a much more raw kid. I didn't see that. I thought he was technically pretty sound. And part of that is these European kids, once they decide to play football, like they really get into it and take it seriously. And once they see like a path to education in the States and all that, these guys really work at it. And that's why I think when PPI first came out and schools started to fly over to Germany and evaluate recruits, there was a lot of skepticism about that. The precedent's now been set by these groups before that these guys are a lot of them have turned out. There's a lot of success stories. So you feel good about that. This kid, I think, has every tool in the book. You don't find 6'8", 6'9" that can bend the way he does. Part of me still wonders if I didn't go high enough. I think he has a chance. If you look at the guys in this class and you say who has the most NFL upside in the class, I really think he's top of the list for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I didn't know if I was going to go that high. I was trying to be like, hey, I don't want to be the homer here, but I just watched him, and you worry about 6'9". Can he get down and bend and get down in these guys? And his arms are unbelievable long, quick feet. So I think the ceiling's there, right? Maybe it doesn't work out, but the ceiling certainly is there. Joey Okla was the first one in this class. And he played a big part as a recruiter. But to go up in Wisconsin, Wisconsin had an offer, grew up a Badgers fan. Wisconsin's obviously not hurting on the offensive line in their class either, but Illinois doesn't go up there very often and get somebody. So what are they getting out of the Badger State and Joey Okla? Yeah,
I think it's almost the opposite tale from Magnus Møller, where you really know what you're getting here in this guy. Comes from an outstanding high school football program that's put out a lot of college prospects, but it's particularly on the offensive line. And he's been a standout player for them, been a leader for them, been kind of a rock on that team. Interior guys, sometimes those guys get overlooked, but like I said, the Doug Kramers of the world will tell you, the Kendrick Greens of the world will tell you that you need those guys, and those guys can anchor your offensive line. That's what I think you're getting here with Joey Okla. And I think that's why Illinois targeted him as one of the first guys in the class and somebody that they wanted to be a foundational piece, because he's extremely safe. He's going to do everything they need to do. He's going to be technically sound. He's going to work extremely hard. I wouldn't be shocked if that guy's starting multiple years for Illinois, somewhere on the offensive line, probably center, guard. He can give you depth at both positions. But I think you look at Doug Kramer as maybe, kind of a blueprint for how his career could go.
Yeah, you'd be shocked if he's not a captain at some point with the way he kind of approaches it. All right, one more Midwest guy I got to ask you about. And that's Hunter Whitenack. Not a surprise Bret Bielema offered this kid 6'7", 300 pounds. Another Midwest kid out of state, though, out of Indiana. Didn't have offers from some of those in-state programs, but Illinois gets in on him before those schools have a chance to see him in camps, and they close that one down. Do you think Hunter Whitenack is a guy that can play tackle at that size, or do you think he's interior? What do you think of him?
Yeah, I think you can go either, but you're probably looking at a right tackle if I had to guess. Massive, obviously really, really big. But at that size, I think he was the one with the big wrestling background, right? I think that was what we liked about him. Is usually being really tall isn't an advantage in wrestling. So if you're that tall and you're able to have some success on the mat, you've got to be, strong and able to bend and understand leverage. And he does. He was one where, the film's like, we have this big giant kid just mauling guys. We don't really know much else about him because that was in the COVID year of not getting to see guys at camp. So that was tough. Then things opened back up. Him and Joey Okla showed up at the same camp at Under Armour, and we were going, okay, this guy can move pretty well for how big he is. And that's when he started to inch up the rankings. So, another one where that's kind of the theme, I think, of this class is you take big developmental bodies and now, you got to work to mold them. I think Hunter's in that boat, but obviously there's a whole lot to work with there.
Allen, to me, this reminds me of Lovie Smith's first class, which ended up being a very good foundation class for him. I mean, you mentioned Hobbs, Palczewski, Kendrick Green, Vidarian Lowe, and those guys all made big impacts. Owen Carney just had a nice season. Kirby Joseph just had a nice season. What do you think this class? Is this class similar in that regard? You think it's a solid foundation for Bret Bielema?
I do, yeah. And like I said, I think there's a lot of high upside developmental bodies in this class. And I think that when you look in the Big Ten West, when you look around the league, that's a lot of what it is. That's what Iowa and Wisconsin and even Northwestern and Nebraska, that's what they've done. I think that's what you have to do to win on that side of the conference. And I think with Illinois is going after the right kids. And so I do think that in a couple of years, it may take a little bit of time for the fruits of this class to kind of show themselves. But I do think that in a couple of years, you'll look back similarly and we'll be able to rattle off the same amount of names that have made an impact, particularly on both fronts.
So if we look to 2023, Allen, what do you think is the next step for Bret Bielema and his staff?
Yeah, so I think that you want to continue to build your reputation in state to where you can continue to win some of those battles at the top and maybe even a few more, or you go a little bit higher on the board. I think that Joey Okla was a good first kind of foray into Wisconsin. That's a bordering state that has some talent that you can go up there and get talent from. And you don't have to beat Wisconsin. There's great kids that go from Wisconsin every year that end up going to NDSU or Northern Illinois, or, I think that you got to get some of those guys to camp and evaluate those kids. And so I think I don't think that the next step is anything too drastic. I think they laid the foundation in this class. They set their blueprint, and now it's just progression from that. I don't see a huge need to change what they're doing or to say like, we got to do something different in 2023. I think it's just continuing on the same upward path that you started in 22.
Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports National recruiting analyst. Allen, looking forward to seeing you on Big Ten Network yet again on Wednesday, and then a much-deserved vacation, man.
Yeah, I'll clean up this before then. But yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.